agenda item to the joint meeting? Is that something that would be appropriate?
I think you guys should go through the ordinance, but you could recommend that the STR committee consider the question on STR.
Yes, sure. Okay, fair enough.
Or something of that.
Sure. I have no further comments.
Okay. Well, I'll chime in then.
Sure, why not?
I actually agree with what Chris is saying, particularly from the standpoint that we now have a whole new bureaucracy who's going to be looking at this thing, which is the State Housing Commission. What, I forget the acronym, but yeah, HCD. And as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have not heard from them in terms of any comments on this ordinance. So just as we have been through so many times before, we will go through a document and then it will be changed a lot from the result of Coastal Commission staff input. So if we have to go through that and we have to go through the Housing Commission, I had no objection to going through it tonight, but I just feel like, sometimes we're wasting a lot of time when we know that there's going to be changes coming down the line.
So we have gotten more diligent, at least in consulting with the Coastal Commission on things. And the Coastal Commission now is working closely with HCD. So one of the people in their office specializes in these ADU ordinances and meets with HCD. So she has been communicating with HCD about Trinidad's ordinance, even though it hasn't been officially submitted to them. But she has taken questions back that we've talked about at our meetings. And they would like to get this question answered before official submittal to HCD.
Like I said, I don't have any problem of doing it tonight, but under duress. I imagine, it very closely follows the state law. There's only some minor deviations, primarily at the recommendation of the Coastal Commission to protect coastal resources. I don't expect that it's going to change a lot. There's not a lot of room to. Thank you.
All right, so then are we okay at least just proceeding and discussing it tonight, keeping it on the agenda? I mean, I would like to go over some of the stuff. I have some questions just to clarify. But yeah, I also will say I'd like to see it again, kind of at some point in to your guys' points, once kind of the dust has settled from the other stuff. So,
and with significant public input where possible,
opportunities.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda then?
I will move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All right, in favor?
Right.
Aye. All right, unanimous. Okay, at this time, we reserve 3 minutes per person for items from the floor. I see nobody other than our city manager here and nobody online. So we will move past that onto our first agenda item for tonight, which is an update on the closure of the trail and progress to date to reopen it.
All right. So just a monthly update on the temporary closure of Axel and Bird Memorial Trail. So we got a report from Tom via the Trails Committee that the TAS have said that they are going to discuss the report at their November board meeting and then present the report to the management team. And they've also communicated that to the city manager. So we're still waiting for that report. The city manager did have Public Works do some work on the fencing at the top and bottom of the trail, so that people can't go around it. And then also the city manager has requested GHD to put together some recommendations for some short-term repairs so the trail can be reopened while the reroute is being planned. So all those things are moving forward. I think we're making some progress.
Eli, did you have anything to add? No?
No, I think she covered it well. I just wanted to make sure if you guys had any questions about anything. I'll just elaborate a little bit. So the actual lingering memorial trail at the top, we extended the fence considerably, probably at least 30 or 40%, in addition to what we had previously. It goes into the berry briars, and they can't get around it. Before there was a little bit of area that looked like some people had tried to go through there. And at the bottom, we
recording in progress.
What they call reattached the fence, just to make sure that it was where it should be on the posts. And then they added some material that they called the branches to create like a thicket, so that people wouldn't try to go through. Otherwise, I checked it today at the top. It looks good. I checked it at the bottom the other day, and with the matting and the netting that's on it, I couldn't see any kind of footprints or anything or something that seemed to indicate that people were trying to use that, and it looked quite secure. And hopefully we can get, a copy of the report soon after they take it to the Jurai management. First we're taking it to the Jurai Ancestral Society, and then we're bringing it to the Jurai management team. And then, like Trevor was saying, we're hoping that Steve Al can come up with some kind of a short-term fix. More than likely it will entail what we had previously indicated, that we would do possibly repair a couple steps that might be dangerous down short term, and then definitely create some easier, hopefully a safer way to go from the trail to the beach. Might be some steps or whatever.
Questions from the commissioners, Tom?
Do you plan on reaching out to see if they could be here for the December meeting? Or that
When you say they, meaning
the Ancestral Society, is that something that
I could ask them, I could,
yeah,
I could tell them that the planning commission, if you guys as a planning commission requested it, or I could tell them that one member of the planning commission requested it.
well, we're kind of curious and we're getting monthly reports, right? So that would be the next big thing. And also, I asked last time, who's going to pay for it? And I understand that this initial work is done by, is paid for, but for the trail itself, who's going to be paying for the trail? Is that the city?
For rerouting it?
Yeah.
We would have to look for grant funds, and we might partner with the Conservancy, has offered some potential funding, and we might partner with the Ancestral Society in applying for grant.
You're open to doing that. Great. You're open to doing that, whatever it takes to make something nice. Great.
Yeah, we're getting the grant managers, and we'll be getting the grant managers involved in the repair options so that they know what's going on and can keep an eye out for grants who qualify for that.
Great, thanks.
Tom, just to clarify for me, the request to have the TAS at the next meeting would be to have them present their findings, the report, or what would be that? Just so we can kind of get
to get the report.
Okay.
That's how I see it, to be able to see the report. The path is the big thing, the route, if the path is going to change, that changes things significantly and how it's fixed. Yeah. So that would be a really strong thing to give, is the understanding of how it's going to be routed.
Yeah, which would be a more long-term fix.
Which is, could be, the sooner we figure that out, the sooner we can figure out how it can happen. Once the path is figured out, then we can add steps to the path, but if the path needs to be determined by the Ancestral Society, as I understand it.
Yeah, that's the long-term path. The short-term path would basically be where people have gone down.
Yeah,
We would just make some steps so that somehow people can safely enter that area.
yeah, I understand. That's the second option. Yeah, that would try to do something to get a real route going. That's going to be for long term.
Yeah, and like Trevor's saying, that's going to entail grant funding, so that's going to take a while. But what I'm getting at basically is you wanted to see a copy of the report. Is that the main reason? In other words, if they submitted the report, would that be sufficient by your January meeting, unless you meet in December? Or did you still want to see them here?
Yeah, whatever. That'd be the next step in moving forward and seeing what the engineer has to say. And also, they're looking at the report in several meetings, and hopefully there's a path and good vision starting to develop. Yeah, whatever information you get.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I could relay, what the intent is from the commission as to, if they definitely want to be present, or if it's mainly to get a copy of the report. So I did. Anyone else as to how I should word this to the?
But I think the report itself would be excellent, right? I think they should also be involved in discussions of this short-term solution, right? Like if there's a specific route of the short-term option that is most appealing to them, then we should certainly consider that. Right?
Yeah, what I wanted to do, and I'll let Trevor talk right after, was basically to utilize the existing route that people use. And this way to allow enough room for work on the post route, without trying to move it where it might be closer to that, make it more difficult to work. So I'm hoping that once we open it, that we can keep it open for the most part, while they're doing some work on the other.
Right, but they have some influence over whether soil disturbance is permitted, right? So it'd be nice to know what options are acceptable to them and which ones are not.
So we do plan on bringing this to a management team meeting, and I think that's probably the best venue to start with before.
So I want to make sure that it's clear, because what I understood from reading your staff report is that the city manager, Eli, is requesting GHD to provide recommendations for short-term repairs.
Right.
Which is, my interpretation of that is that is not in the report that GHD is submitting to TAS.
Right.
Okay, so there's really two reports that we're interested in, I think. One is the short term and one is the long term. Okay.
Right.
Okay. I personally, I don't know that we need to have the Ancestral Society here for either one of those. I think it's most appropriate that, given the sensitivity of all of this, that that once the report is submitted, then we can take a look at it after that.
And then for your information, the meetings that we've been having with the GRI management team, they have actually been online, so we haven't been present in person with them, meaning the representatives, Sarah and Kelly. So more than likely, if they did appear at some point, it probably would be soon. Okay, so for the time being, we'll focus on number one, proceeding with the short-term fix with our city engineer, and number two, to try to get a copy of the report. was prepared as soon as possible, and then share it with the commission. And then, as Trevor was saying, we'll, try to discuss this with the Churai management team, and in the future, consider bringing the Churai Ancestral Society here as needed.
Yeah, and I mean, I would express to them that the planning commission is asking for a copy, and we're not trying to get one. We are asking for a copy of that report, just to, if that helps with your communication with them. And then I just had a question for either one of you. When is the next TMT scheduled for? I see that the TAS is going to get the report presented at their November meeting. When is the TMT scheduled to have its next meeting? When it would in theory be presented?
Yeah, we do have a TMT meeting next Wednesday, which will be discussing the Trinidad coastal resilience plan. And we're going to be mentioning at that meeting also the fact that, we want, we can get the report now. We're getting the report. So we'll
When's the next TMT meeting after the November one? Is there one scheduled?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you happen to know when the Ancestral Society is having their November board meeting? Is it going to be before or after this?
Yeah, they have.
Okay. So they might not be ready given the timing then.
Yeah.
And then the last question I have is that just the comment about the last paragraph where it talks about, you're reaching out to GHD. I just want to express a little concern over the word that it's hoped to have these by the end of the year. I hope we can maybe direct them or ask them or tell them we would like to have these by the end of the year. The temporary reopening option.
Right.
Because I think if we just kind of wait on their time scale and don't express to them that it has some urgency to us, I see this continuing to just stall out. And then we're going to find ourselves up against the next renewal timeframe, and that's going to be particularly frustrating.
Yeah.
We've not had some progress.
Okay.
So maybe reach out to GHD and say, can we have it by the end of the year? Is there any reason why we won't see it by January 1st so that we can then see it theoretically at our January Planning Commission meeting?
Yeah. Yeah, and we did indicate in the request what the timeline would be that we were looking for would be to get something before the January meeting, so we can make sure that we share it with the commission.
Right. Thanks. Moving on to agenda item number 2. We're always riveting policies for after the fact planning permits.
So this is continued from the last meeting where we talked about potentially making some changes to the policy. So we talked about adding some clarifications within the text itself, and then adding a standard procedure and condition to clarify that all expenses are responsibility of the applicant. If you guys like the wording, you can approve it tonight or make some more changes.
All right, we'll open it up for commissioners. Anybody got anything on this? Anything you want to see different? Please.
So, Trevor, I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to make sure. I want to know, I think it would be useful that we understand how policies like this fit in with ordinances. And what is the precedence? How do they integrate together? How do they interface? How does it all fit together? And the reason I'm asking that is for the purposes of trying to understand how much enforcement we have with this policy.
I think that this for after the fact permit processing, I think that policy is probably the appropriate place to have it. And it's really, even without this policy, this is basically the process we would use. It's just that it would be a little bit more fly by night on the conditions of approval. So I think this gives applicants and the planning commission a little bit more surety and, some information up front to know what the process is going to look like. Because again, if someone did, if we didn't have this policy in place and someone did work, and we put a stop work order on it, whatever, and then tell them either remove it or apply for a permit. So we use the same process basically, and so we're just kind of putting it in writing. Something like the detached living space and definition of a kitchen, that would be best in an ordinance at some point. But because, you know, anything has to go through the coastal commission, and we know anything going through the coastal commission takes years, it was easier just to set it by policy. And again, it's conditions of approval. And so, you know, an applicant does have the ability to object to conditions during the hearing or appeal your decision. If they don't like the conditions. So, you know, again, I think it's not improper to have it as a policy as opposed to an ordinance, but when we do the big update, we will include some.
So there would not be a situation where someone could come back and say, I don't acknowledge this as being legal because it is not a formally approved part of the general plan or ordinances.
I think someone could try, but again, the alternative is just to make them tear it out.
Well, what if they? Yes, you're right, of course. But how do you enforce them to do that?
Well, we do have a nuisance abatement ordinance, so unpermitted work is a public
That's, I
nuisance.
guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is that there is,
We do have a formal
okay,
enforcement
That's-
nuisance abatement ordinance, yes,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely.
okay, thank you.
I just had one, I guess, comment / question. One of the things that we talked about that brought this up is the frustration that there's no our hammer, our penalty is somewhat weak as far as, you know, economic deterrent, that kind of stuff. And the item 4, the condition number 4 that you have in here, I just didn't know if it was worth putting in here. I had sent to you, Trevor. I don't know if I got it to you in time to look at it. It was from the County of Placer. And for everybody else, it's a County of Placer has an example after the fact building permit. And one of the things they had in there that I thought was interesting is a little bit more of an incentive to not just ask for forgiveness, but to actually ask for permission. And it was that for additional cost after the fact permits, they have to have basically a wet stamp document from an engineer, registered engineer, geologist, or architect saying, you know, stipulating certain things, you know, things that can't be seen. So there's an expense, there's a cost, there's a hassle with finding someone that's willing to do that after the fact for somebody. And I don't know if that held any interest, or if you thought that was a good thing to have, or again, I know I didn't get it to you in time.
So that would be part of that sort of the standard after the fact building permit process. So they would, as part of getting the building permit, they would have to have someone draw up detailed plans, including the footings and things. I've even heard of where they actually make, you know, if it's a foundation, they actually make you dig up the foundation or cut into the wall so they can see what's in the wall for after the fact permit. So they do that as part of the building permit process. We don't normally require stamped plans at the planning permit stage, but if it's an after the fact permit, I mean, you could, it's already there. So you could as part of.
I don't know what other commissioners thought about that idea.
I mean, it sounds like it would be caught at the building permit. Like we could approve a project after the fact and then they apply for the building permit and then our building inspector or the city engineer should enforce that, you know, said structure is structurally sound, it's stamped, you know, the design that is stamped by engineer.
Not necessarily, right? It wouldn't have to be.
It depends. I'm guessing probably that platform probably did not require an engineer stamp. The previous project that was larger, that would have required an engineer stamp. So it depends on the building code, what requires an engineer stamp.
It was just a thought, you know, because again, if it happens at the building inspector's time, then there's again no economic disincentive to just ask for forgiveness instead of permission.
Yeah, I think what, you know, but I think it's a good point in. The city does have a new building official. I haven't had a lot of contact with him. I was sort of wondering, and I get it, there just hasn't been permits, or am I getting referrals? So it might, you know, and so maybe the question is having some sort of follow-up. I should follow up with the building inspector and make sure, and I sent him this stuff, but I didn't get confirmation that they applied. Did they even ever apply for a building permit? I don't know. And maybe that's the piece that's missing. Follow up between planning and building. Which I should do anyway, but part of the formal policy then might be.
So, just, if you could take it just one step further, what wording would you request? I mean, I understand what you're asking for, but you do say that all expenses related to permitting unauthorized, including but not limited to studies, plans, remediation.
Etc. I mean, I guess my concern, I hear you, and I went back and forth because et cetera opens us up to kind of almost whatever we want to require, right? You know, things like that, right? I just didn't want to get us in a position where somebody might think, well, that's above and beyond what the intent of this is, and then we're arguing that point with somebody. I mean, what they have here is that just the letter must specifically identify and certify the following items, and they list foundation, entire lateral structure, floor framing, wall framing, and roof diaphragm. That all work completed on the structure without benefit of permits conforms to current codes and structural requirements. So it really puts some teeth. And I don't know if we don't feel that's necessary, I'm fine. I came across this in my research, and I think it also will serve a little bit as guidance for the building department. Hey, here's the conditions. So here's some things you know to look for. This is one more thing that we have to have and we're looking for. And it could preclude somebody having to unnecessarily tear open walls and expose foundations if there's somebody willing to say, no, it's built to that. And they're taking on that liability, so to speak. I don't know.
Is that, what's the difference between what you have in mind and what's in condition number 2, I guess? They're talking about it just as documenting conditions and or proof of permits for existing improvements.
I guess for me, it sets a standard. You know, a registered geologist, architect, engineer is different from just providing evidence. Here's a picture. This is the picture I provided. This is somebody with credentials saying, yes, I agree, this does meet those criteria.
Well, then with that, and maybe I didn't comprehend the entire thing, but if it was an electrical issue of being unpermitted, that's not included there.
No, you're right.
So, I mean, you could carry this on
for sure
for a number of different things. If it was a plumbing issue, or if it was electrical, what else other than maybe, you know,
this is probably something that we don't really need to worry about. I came across it and wanted it to just kind of get it the light of day for all of us just to see and think about it.
Well, we could add either a new number. The number 2 has more to do with sort of pre-existing improvements. What was the idea with that? So, but maybe it could go under 1 or go between them, that they may be required to show proof that work complies with all codes, applicable codes and standards and regulations.
That would help.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the opening paragraph or the intro, you know, wet stamp, blah, 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 stating that all work completed on the structure without the benefit of permit. So that would encapsulate everything. They just went an additional step and specifically called a few things out, but all work is all work, be it electrical, framing, structural.
With the caveat that not every project would necessarily need that.
Absolutely, right, yeah.
So we're thinking maybe better putting that like in addition to bullet point 2, is that
Covers feverishly.
Well, yeah. I mean, it could be its own, it could be added to 1 or 2. But the wording is the applicant may need to show proof that all unpermitted work complies with all applicable city codes and regulations.
Yes, I still would like add, if we're gonna add something, I would like added that it needs to be from a licensed architect, wet stamped and signed, because otherwise that it's not just something from a general contractor, it's from somebody else kind of, or a builder, or does that make sense?
Well, let's see.
But not everything requires
To
this.
Tristan's point, it may not require that, yeah.
but if it does require it, then in order to be compliant with code, they wouldn't be compliant without that, right? Stamp.
Yeah, on the building plans, yeah.
Right.
And I'm also fine if everybody likes it as is, this I'm happy with, and we can always revisit. And if it becomes an issue, or if you think there's a way to handle this, Trevor, with the building department, that would make more sense rather than putting it into a policy.
Why don't let's not finalize that tonight and all. I mean, unless, I mean, I think putting something in may need to show proof that all unpermitted work complies with all applicable codes and regulations. Probably covers it. I think that's pretty safe. But if you want me to do a little more research or talk to Dan.
Well, I'm comfortable with the wording that you've put there, but I think it probably also makes some sense to just coordinate with the building inspector to make sure that he doesn't have some other comments. So, sure.
In item 1, we added and certified after will be reviewed, which is to say it would read will be held to the same standards as if the work had not been completed and will be reviewed and certified according to the standards and regulations of package review. Would and certified apply from someone who has a licensure required to certify something?
I mean, I guess one thing is this is planning permits. And again, at the planning stage, we don't normally have that level of detail. I'm not sure the policy doesn't necessarily say it's just. I guess it's a planning commission, so anything that would come to a planning commission.
And it's not, I hear your point, Trevor, but it's also, I feel it's not quite just a planning permit because it's already happened. It's a little different,
True.
so
It
to
may
me,
be
those
just
same
covered
rules
up.
don't apply.
Yeah, it could. So maybe the thing is to, I mean, we could add a section, we could have a separate section for planning and a separate section for the building permit stage.
Could you explain that?
So we could have standard procedures and conditions for after the fact planning permit approvals and standard procedures and conditions for after the fact building permit. So if there's a separate.
That in our jurisdiction too.
Well, that I would, is probably dictated by the building code, but it's not a bad thing to have in writing for the public to know. But because I think that double the permit fee that comes from building code. So it would basically just be kind of outlining the requirements of the building code.
So if I'm building a house myself. I have to come to, and I come to the planning commission, I need prints. For example, when Tom Lake, I'm sorry, not Tom Lake, Davies, excuse me, came, he did not have signed off prints.
That's right, or even the Vanderpools. I mean, they had nice detailed drawings, but those are not
Right.
structural drawings.
And I guess what I'm getting at is that we approve that.
That's right.
Without having a wet stamp. So, okay, so I guess I'm trying to, and I agree with you, this is after the fact, this is, you know, somebody's screwed up. But I'm just wondering if it's really, we're asking them to provide all of the required permits, et cetera. But there may be cases where a sign off is not necessarily required, but still would be acceptable to the building inspector, right?
Potentially, I mean, I think some small projects, you know, kind of lay people kind of do the specs. I've seen quite a variety of drawings for building permits.
Right.
And yeah, not all of them have to be stamped. I wonder, I mean, you could do something like, you could require that they submit a building permit application and a planning application.
Oh, at the same time.
Yeah. And then you could have comments from the building official. Because they haven't built, so they would need those to apply for the building permit. And it's not gonna change unless you guys change it but it's already built, so. I mean, that might make sense, is where you have to apply, you have to have your building plan submitted and maybe approved by the building official or something like that.
One has schematic drawings and the others are construction docs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would make sense. I like that, because the more I'm thinking about this and having this discussion, that what I suggested is kind of more getting into the territory of the building department, which is not ours necessarily in that little detail. So could that be a condition that you come to us with a approved building permit?
Or at least.
And that way, then at least we feel comfortable, hey, the building department has looked at this and believes that the work was done to standards, because that, if they have a signed off building permit, right? Now, can they get a signed off building permit without the planning permit? Can that chicken go before that egg procedurally?
Let me talk to the building official, but I like the idea. I like the idea, and maybe it's not that the building permit's signed off, but that we have a recommendation from the building official. Maybe that's what it is.
And in theory, we could condition our, based off the recommendations being complied with or something.
Yeah. And then that would help ensure that there's not a disconnect, like we know they applied for a building permit. At least.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it would be good to get the building officials' input, and comments.
Yeah.
And then that would allow for anyone on the commission to, question whether or not it's an engineer stamp or something like that.
But yeah, but thinking about this after the discussion again, I would probably defer to the building official on that anyway.
And he would be able to explain.
Right, okay. All right, so Trevor, you have what you need to bring this back to us again.
Yeah.
All right, on that same topic of bringing things back to us again, agenda item 3, the ADU ordinance. Is there, before we delve into the staff, a thought or an approach away from our traditional page by page that makes more sense tonight? Anybody, or do you just want to start with that and go?
As I recall, Trevor had very specific questions for us. I think that above all else, we should ensure that those questions get answered in the room. I would second that.
But that doesn't mean you can't review the rest of that.
Right. So yeah, I guess if you want to run us through the staff report and then specifically the questions that you have, and we'll start there. Sound great.
And then also you guys saw this in July, I think it was, and so I tried to incorporate your comments or I asked my questions in there. So those, you should see those in there. Yeah, just a little bit more background. Yeah, this is one of these state mandates that, you know, if we weren't in the coastal zone, we would just have to implement the state law. That would work. But it's a very complicated code, and there are certain ADUs that have to be approved ministerially, and they meet these conditions, and then there's these other standards that you still have to approve, but for some reason it's like different. It's not a super well written law. And then the city can allow more or larger ADUs. So there's sort of these minimum. The city has to allow these sort of minimum standards if these ADUs meet these things. And then there's a lot of situations that aren't going to apply under multifamily development. It's just not. So you have to allow ADUs, like 25% of apartments, ADU, storage closets into ADUs. It's a weird, but that's never going to happen in Trinidad with the septic limitations. So I tried to simplify it a little bit. So that's one area where HCD might say we need to add some provisions, because I tried to leave some of those things out because it's already complex as it is. I don't want to make it more complex for things. And I also combined, like I was saying, there's these sort of two layers of these minimum ADUs that cities have to approve, and I just kind of combined those. Sort of one the state says they can't be STRs, and the other one says you can prohibit them from being STRs. It's a little bit of a gray area. And then there's the coastal resource protection standards. So then the Coastal Commission has dictated some of this as well. Some of it has come from me, the parking. I have gone a little bit beyond the state in terms of requiring parking on streets that don't have parking. The height limit is another one I talked about in there, and I'm working with the Coastal Commission on. And then they've been really concerned about the bluff and stability setbacks. That was their big issue. I think I made a note in there that those standard conditions are likely going to be standard conditions on any permit in those areas in our big LCP update. We don't have them now, so they're adding them to the page. So we did develop this under the SB2 grant, which is done now. But I think we're committed to finishing this up. We are going to have to, housing elements have to be approved by HCD now, and so we're going to have to continue to deal with HCD. So we're moving forward with it. I think we're pretty close. And so there's some specific questions in the ordinance itself, but the primary one that the Coastal Commission wanted your input on is the STR issue, because staff are not in agreement, and neither are coastal commissioners in agreement on this issue. So want to know what the city wants. There, so, at this point, I'm proposing, because sort of to keep it to those minimum standards, that the ADU itself can't be an STR. But then the question is, can the primary unit be an STR? And do we allow home share and resident STRs? We could, and I think, the argument is that Trinidad has a cap on STRs. The development of additional ADUs is not going to result in additional STRs. So it's not going to, the idea of not allowing them to be STRs is because ADUs are supposed to provide housing. And so the state or coastal commission doesn't want them to be STRs, but in Trinidad's case, because of the cap, if one becomes an STR, then that means there's another house that's available for a rent long term or owner. So I think it's not so much of a housing issue in Trinidad. So it's what your preference is, what you think do, and we'll take that back to coastal commission and HCD.
I realize we're kind of jumping around, but since we're on the subject of STRs, I guess my feeling is that this whole ADU, from a kind of a top level perspective, is designed to provide more low and middle income housing. And I certainly understand that, and even in Trinidad, that probably could be accomplished with additional ADUs. The problem that I have with saying that ADUs can also be STRs, boy, we're using a lot of acronyms. It's the whole sentence is full. The problem I have with saying that an ADU could be an STR is, yes, the cap is there, but it takes away that low income and middle income housing, because typically, STRs are rented at a pretty high premium. So I don't have an answer, and I'm still grappling with how we would do that, but I just feel like it's contradictory to the state policies to say, flat out that ADUs can be STRs because we have a cap.
I think so I am proposing that the ADU can't be an STR. It's the primary unit. And so I think, in one sense, or even the home share or the resident STR. So would a potential home buyer be able to buy a home, be more likely to be able to buy a home if they knew they could build an ADU and then rent out the home when they're gone in the summer as a resident STR? That, so that might make housing in Trinidad more affordable in that sense. But it's a complex issue, and there's not a simple answer.
So how would that work for existing ADUs?
They would not be subject to that. So
they would be
ADUs, and that's another question that I think you could consider is, this is for ministerial approvals. If someone came to the planning commission for a use permit, could they request their ADU be allowed to be an STR? So these,
Thank you. It's clear as mud. Appreciate it.
These are,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent, but since we're
no, I think that's a really good tangent to get off on personally, because I mean, we're going to get there anyway going through it. I desperately want to have this discussion with the STR committee president. I will say I'm not sure that the three-party joint meeting is the right one for that. I think it might be better to see if we can have a meeting with just us and the STR, a combine our meetings 1 month. So that we can talk and come up with something and then present that finished to the council kind of. Otherwise, then we're going to open up, not that it's a bad thing, but then I'm not sure it would be as productive just saying that forward on that. Because these are really interesting questions as far as the ADUs and how to manage this. And what the definition of affordability is, affordable housing. If you can do this, does that make it affordable? Does it not? And because we have to consider a circumstance where there's only 2 buildings on the property, one's an ADU, one's the primary. What would that circumstance look like? And then, I just think there's a lot of work we can do, and maybe one of us or Trevor could go to an STR meeting to kind of prep them ahead of time. Hey, here's what we want to talk about at our joint meeting, so that way they can kind of be thinking about it ahead of time and make the best use of our time. But I think I'm wandering way away from what we're talking about tonight. Since we're wandering, I did have a question on the height requirements and really wanting to try and understand that. So the state has set their limit of 25, 26 for ADUs. What's their?
So before January 1st this year, it was 16 feet for detached ADUs and no more than a 10% increase in the height of the existing building for attached ADUs.
Okay, and so currently that
new one is 18 feet for detached ADUs, 25 feet for attached.
No percentage.
The only way around that, or to preclude that to supersede that, would be if it's part of our certified LCP, right? So this currently is not, the AD ordinance currently is not within our certified LCP, right?
That's right. Nothing. So ADUs aren't allowed at all, basically, except in the SR zone. If you have a double-sized lot, you can have a second unit. But basically, they're not allowed at all currently under ours.
And the state law mandating them doesn't take precedent. We have to craft our own ADU ordinance because, okay, I'm trying to weave all the different things together. So let's say we draft an ADU ordinance and put it up and it goes through everything. In theory, if it were to pass all the hurdles, we could come in under those because it would then be part of our certified LCP if certifying entities agreed with that and didn't come back to us. So there is still a chance to close the barn door, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of ways to go about that, and I think it's I sort of took the simplest approach for visual resources, community character, and protect public views, because one thing is that the Coastal Act does not protect private views, so you can't use that height for private views. But really, that's a really key to me. I mean, Trinidad has protected private views for 40 plus years, and people have invested money based on those views, and they're protected. So I think it's important. There are a couple other options. If HCD does not like that, we do have a couple of other alternatives. One to designate Trinidad or areas of Trinidad as highly scenic. That could make things easier with HCD. And then there's another way, more explicitly bringing in the design review process, but I think that's a little bit of doesn't really follow the state regulations anyway. So I think this approach, we'll see. And the Coastal Commission seems supportive. I guess it's just how much pushback is HCD going to.
What about respecting?
Keeping the height.
Okay.
What we consider treating Trinidad as very special. They had a review of that. And I also wanted to, I see that, or I've heard quite a while that the Coastal Commission, this is what I hear from you, that they don't, that we can't, the views aren't limited. Or they impact, view impact is not what they're determining. But in their paperwork here, I see all over where it's like protecting sensitive areas, they do want to keep it in a certain manner. Although they're not really saying that, but it is protecting a certain cultural or not cultural, but a certain way of it looking.
Yeah, I mean, environmentally sensitive habitat areas have a specific designation that's usually sort of environmental, natural areas. But no, they public views, so from streets of the coast, but also visual resources like town of Mendocino. That quaint, it's quaint and it's got this uniqueness, and Trinidad is similar in that you want to protect that look and feel of this coastal community. Now, we have a lot of large houses in Trinidad, so it's hard to argue that everything should be kept low, but that's again going through a design review process. But yeah, so protecting visual resources, public views, and community character is in there somewhere too. So yeah, I think they're supportive of keeping the height limit. At least that's for ministerial approval. Someone can come in and ask for a use permit design review for a larger. And that's, and I think that's gonna be hopefully enough for HC.
That's when it goes into that other for review. And really there's enough hills and we could design it in. If everybody works with it a little bit, it can work. The house over there is a prime example of it. You don't have to take away views to get what you want. And so that's what, in regards to me, it's just we need people, the teacher needs a place to live. That's the biggest thing to me, and we have to just, however, to make that happen. Getting back to what we were talking about. But yeah. I think the Coastal Commission wants what we want. That's my take. How I read it, how my internal lawyer reads it.
Yeah.
Is
No, yeah, like I said, I think they're supportive of this version. It's not because it's not necessarily brand new anymore from January 1st, but still it hasn't come through an LCP amendment yet, I don't think. So it's not an issue that they've dealt with. We're used to the 16.
I got what I suspect is a very outlandish question. But the issuance of these OWTS permits or reform improvements sort of as a check, essentially, right, for ministerial approvals. Here's the outlandish question: will Trinidad ever have a sewer system?
Not likely, but highly unlikely. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is no new discharges are allowed in the ASBS. So where would you discharge it? And two, the expense of a sewer system for this low population is just, I don't think, ever going to justify. And there was a period of time in the 70s where there was a lot of public money for sewers, and that just.
Okay, my
I
question
can
is
say 99%.
which means that the robustness of this OWTS improvement as a check will persist indefinitely. Okay. Going back to the original question about whether the primary residence should be an ADU or not. In looking at the definition of an ADU, maybe there's more robust definitions elsewhere. But Is there language anywhere describing how much smaller an ADU should be than the primary residence? Right? Could someone build a 1,500 square foot primary residence and a 1,300 square foot ADU, live in the ADU and rent the primary residence?
Yes. And I think when we wrote the original, our first ADU ordinance back in there was more of a limit on, it couldn't be more than something like that. And I think there is a standard in here. It can't be more than 50% or 800 square feet or something like that. So there is a limit, but so the state law has loosened that over the years. They want you to at least be able to build an 800 square foot studio or one bedroom, and I think 1,200.
I guess also referencing the original question here. I mean, I think I would support allowing the primary residence to be an STR for the reasons that you gave, that you're still creating an additional housing unit. And given our STR ordinance, there's another housing unit available in town, whether you like it or not. And I think I like the idea of, I think going back to like affordability, housing affordability, I like the idea of somebody who's like creative and trying to hustle and wants to live in Trinidad, but is just maybe a working class person, like them being able to find creative options to make a house or to buy and make it like a living in Trinidad, I guess. And I think like allowing some amount of flexibility so that way they can do that, and not just saying no, you can't have a short-term rental. I mean, those short-term rentals, as we know, like they bring in a lot of additional income. Could allow somebody to live in Trinidad.
Well, and I can think of an example in town where the primary residence and the STR in the back have flopped over the years, where the person used to live in the front house and now they live in the back house, and their front house became the STR and vice versa for rental things. So, I mean, I guess there's kind of like a precedent for that kind of a concept already.
And then to make that, a little bit more, that someone has to actually be live in Trinidad, you can require owner occupancy. It can be an STR if the owner occupies the ADU.
Yeah, I would support that.
We don't currently require that though for existing STRs or occupancy, right?
No.
So I'm just thinking logistically, now we've created a subclass of STR to try and track and logistics of making this process for.
It'd still be full-time STRs because it's a separate living unit, if they're gonna run it more than 60 days a year. But then it couldn't just be someone's investment property that they're, adding to their investment.
But I guess Aaron's sort of wondering if that's like an additional level of complication in terms of like enforcing the STR ordinance.
No, but it is an added layer. It's an added layer on.
Staff to track whether or not it's owner occupied, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's that hard. I mean, we have that set up, not that we have resident STR licenses, but we have that set up. It's pretty easy to verify based on the homeowner exemption on your property tax bill. Obvious way to verify that.
Well, is that even an issue if we maintain the cap?
Not necessarily. It's still an added housing unit. I was just saying, if you want to limit it to like what Tristan's scenario was, someone, wants to live in Trinidad and make it work, and that's their way to make it work. Maybe that's what you're trying to facilitate. But no, it doesn't have to be limited to.
There's not a cap on JADUs though, correct? Yes, or that's some of the text in the current version.
There,
Right, that's,
well, I believe that might be true because,
so JD in section 17.54.020.
yeah, so
JDUs
JDUs shall not be subject to this cap because JDUs, in general, aren't gonna increase water use and track, because you're basically carving out. Now, in reality, they probably do because you have two people, before the JDU, you had two people living in a 3-bedroom home. After the JDU, you have 4 people living in a 3-bedroom home. So yeah, it will increase a little bit, but in general, the Coastal Commission doesn't consider it development. I'm hoping that, currently the health department does, even if it doesn't have a real kitchen, if it's a separate unit, they're gonna require that much bigger septic system. I'm hoping that, one of the reasons for limiting the size of the kitchen in the JADU is that I'm hoping that when the health department updates their regulations, which they're supposed to be doing, that they will make some allowances for.
Yeah, it seems pretty unlikely, but could someone occupy full-time the JADU and then rent the rest of the residents?
Actually, yes.
So is the
And-
Coastal Commission including JADUs in their, I guess their.
Well, there's examples in town already.
I mean, that would,
Yeah, but are they including in regard to this specific question, right? Are they also considering JADUs to be ADUs when they're guidance on whether the primary residence can be an STR?
I don't know. We haven't gotten into that level of detail. Certainly JADUs would be, a more affordable form of housing. And we do have sort of some de facto ones already. But I will point out, I don't believe the state code requires JADUs to not be STRs. So, but essentially that would be a home share STR. I mean, that's essentially what that would be. And maybe JADUs can be home share.
Yeah, I was looking at kind of your primary question here, the one particular area that I'd like to get our input on, whether STRs of any type are allowed in either the J or ADU or primary dwelling. That's on the packet page 1, the first full paragraph. And I had kind of just made a margin note here that junior ADUs are, as an STR is basically a home share STR. I really don't know that, I can't find a reason yet to see that any differently. So from that standpoint, just for me personally, I would say yes, an STR could be allowed in there. It's already not subject to the cap. Somebody can be doing it anyway right now. The ADU piece is where the question really starts to kick in for, are those part of the STRs or not? Are they, is it fair to exclude them? Is it, they want us to exclude them? I don't know. It's that balance point. So an ADU becomes an STR, in theory that frees something else up. So if we're trying to do the net balance of, is there a scenario where that would happen where it wouldn't necessarily create an additional unit? Let's say, the maximum build out 36 ADUs.
But again, with the cap,
Right.
do we care?
Yeah.
Right. And I think the other sort of from like the social standpoint, so ADUs, right, they're thought to be great low income housing or middle income housing. If you want to rent, but like if you want to buy a house as a middle income person or lower income person, again, like having an ADU that could potentially produce, having an ADU as an STR could make or break the difference between being able to buy a house or afford to buy a house or not, or just being stuck in the rental market as, you know, as a lower middle income person. It's like, yeah, you can rent this ADU, I'll charge you $1,500 a month for it, or you can buy the whole place for $500,000, and then there's an ADU there that can float some of your mortgage. I think that's, you know, in terms of, I'm getting maybe a little off task getting into like a social justice or equality, whatever you want to say, opportunity.
No, I agree with you, but I think that in the case of both an ADU and a JADU, that potential income, whether it's an if it's an STR, will improve the value of the house and probably make the purchase price of the house go up, right? So having a built-in source of profits isn't automatically going to make housing more affordable. In fact, it might actually make the house become more unaffordable.
Although you can't buy a property with an STR license.
Right. And I guess to Tristan's point, I'm sorry, Tom, you were like,
Oh, go ahead.
no.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's creating rentals, which it's intended to do, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, creating rentals is great, but I also personally like, I mean, I think that there should also be a pathway for lower and middle income people to buy homes as well, because that's how the primary way that Americans generate their personal wealth is through prep.
Which is then, you know, a reason to allow home share and resident STRs, at least in one of you.
Yeah.
Why do I keep hearing rumors about the state, I guess, allowing an ADU to be sold separately from the primary residence?
Yeah, that's a new law this year. And that doesn't, I guess it would like, but it wouldn't be a subdivision, so it'd have to be like a condo. Like where you're buying, I don't know how it would work. Where, yeah, you're basically, you're buying the building, but not the land.
Yeah, that's like I said, I don't know anything.
And that's and that applies to the coastal zone, I think, is because that might be, because several of the new laws, they've always sort of excluded the coastal zone. And this year, several of the laws do not, like the density bonus laws. Because of our septic.
I guess I was just responding to what you were saying, Tristan, is that if that law, when that law goes into effect, if it hasn't already, I don't know, that kind of means that someone could conceivably put up for sale an ADU and it could be sold. You know, you buy the property and then you know you're going to sell the ADU for X number of dollars, and that goes towards helping you pay for the other place. That's when it's going to get really.
And it's when you don't have to require parking for ADUs, so you're selling a place that doesn't have parking, and then for the most part they're going to be connected to the same septic system.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
Interesting problem.
Yeah, I know.
I guess
Get this ordinance passed before the end of the year.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, to that, there's that comment in here that still bothers me where an ADU is built by a qualified nonprofit, right? In here, it can be sold separately, so it's already in here. But without getting into detail on that, back to kind of your point, Tristan, one of the things that I struggle with is, you know, allowing an ADU to also be an STR. An STR, almost by definition, my impression, having lived here for a few years now, is that it has a greater revenue stream than just renting something outright as a single. I mean, there are examples in town where people have taken what was relatively affordable housing for somebody and have turned it into an STR because that creates greater revenue. So on the one hand, I'm like, well, you know, no, we shouldn't allow that in these ADUs. But then is it fair Because that, then somebody can just do that, and now that's no longer affordable housing because they can do that. But then also, if you're trying to be able to buy the main house, then that revenue stream could be, amazing to make that opportunity happen.
I mean, I'd certainly see both sides of it there. I mean,
And then but then by the same token, we don't preclude other people from being able to do that already. So why would we preclude that here? I know it's not apples to apples, but
I mean, well, like Trevor said, we can always just only allow that on non-ministerial permits. They want their ADU to be a yard, has to come for us, versus if they want to go ministerial.
Well, again, does it even have to come to us if there's a CAD? And they have to apply for a permit and go through the whole process that the STR ordinance requires. And if they are successful, then fine. But if there's no openings, then they can apply, but they can get the permit. So
Just rent it. They just rent
And
it.
they just rent.
well, yeah.
It's easier, and they're gonna do that.
Right.
I don't, the setbacks, I don't see a problem with the setbacks other than trying to not block the views.
Yeah, that's a setback issue, and that's a question hasn't really come up at the coastal commission, our coastal commission meetings, because again, I think if that's a new 2023 law, is that no, you can't require a front setback if it would include construction of an 800 square foot.
There'd be standard sidewalk and standard set, amount of space from the road.
But most people, I mean, a lot of people's front yards are either their leach field or their reserve area. But yeah, that's one I didn't change in the ordinance. I thought because no one said anything, so I was completely curious.
But from what you just said, though, if you said, I want to put an 800 square foot or less ADU in my front yard, and assuming that
You can build it on your driveway so that.
okay.
You don't have to have parking.
But my leach field is not there, so I could come right out and I would not have to worry about setbacks.
If you couldn't otherwise build an 800 square foot.
Well,
So it's only so you can't require a front setback if the front setback would preclude construction of an 800 square foot ADU.
But if there's somewhere else on the lot where they could do it, then the setback is not waived.
That's right.
Okay.
oh, okay, I was thinking,
That's how it's
the other way.
Yeah.
That you could do it, regardless.
Regardless, okay.
So, okay.
And I guess on that same, why is it limited to front yards? I'm assuming because that's where streets normally are. However, in this town, we have alleyways where there are street frontages in the back where you wouldn't have a neighbor to neighbor fence, so you're not impacted.
So it's probably a fire code thing because you have to have 8 feet between buildings. And so that's why there's a side and rear setback so that buildings can't be right up against each other, but on the street, you don't have to worry about it.
I'm just thinking of like the alleyways on, View and Ocean are the two streets within in town.
That would be a rear setback.
Is that included in this, or is that, so a rear setback?
But it's only 4 feet, not Trinidad's rear setback is normally 15 feet. Although for accessory structures already don't have to meet. That's why you have a lot of garages.
So to try and move us along here a little bit, is it fair, Trevor, that if you were to leave here with one thing, you would like us to weigh in on whether STRs of any type are allowed in the J or the ADU or primary dwelling, those three things? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So I guess maybe would it make sense then to kind of, as a commission, talk about those three examples? At least to get our sense, and then I guess to Chris's point at the beginning, what is the timeline on this? Do we have time to reach out to the STR committee and get their opinions?
I think we're already too late to get this ordinance in place before the laws go into effect in 2024. So no, but let's get it done by the end of 2024, because then there'll be a whole new set of laws.
Right, okay.
Well, I kind of like sharing the pain with the STR community.
Okay. I'm all for that.
And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, I think that they have a specific responsibility to worry about STRs in the community, and I think we definitely need to coordinate with them.
Is there something that would be helpful in making that decision? Some sort of matrix or case examples or something like that? If you have some suggestions.
Yeah, I think if you can kind of, I think a joint meeting between the two bodies would be great to dive into this, so that we can share the knowledge and expertise.
Those are my words.
But yeah, if you could come up with like the simplest example, a lot in town that has no outbuildings on other than the primary structure, they want to add an ADU, what would that do? So then we can kind of use that as the case point for either a JADU, an ADU, and then the primary as an STR on that property. Then maybe another example of a property that has primary and existing ADU or STR on it, and then the ability now to add the other, because as I recall, right, the max is one ADU, JADU, STR, and primary, right? Those three can coexist currently. So just, I think coming with that so everybody can kind of see and they reach out to property owners, hey, are you okay if we use your property as an example so we can actually see it instead of just vaguely talking about it? That would be helpful for me anyway, in this discussion, to really kind of see an example of what that might look like in town.
And I would just throw in the difference between ministerial versus CDP review kind of.
And administrative, right? Because there's still, there's ministerial, administrative, and then kind of a full CDP, right?
Yeah.
And because that's carved out here, administrative are really with just the minor OWTS stuff, right?
Because I don't hear a clear consensus.
The only consensus I hear is that we think the STR committee should be involved in this discussion.
You mean with respect to your question?
Yeah.
I think that it's very complicated,
Yeah.
and I mean, I have an opinion, everyone else has an opinion, and I think we can share those opinions and our perspectives and how this is written with the STR committee.
And I think that that's actually, if we're going to get, because again, there's not a consensus on the Coastal Commission or Coastal Commission staff either. So I think the more work you put into that, the better we can justify the city's position.
Sitting on the STR committee. I just wanted to remind everybody that is, in addition to me, 2 members of the public, and then 2 individuals involved in the STR industry who may not have home affordability at the forefront of their mind. Right? And I'm not saying that is a good or bad thing, but the spirit of the law, as we all recognize, is to increase the number of affordable housing units in town. Right. So I do think that there is some merit, since this was a suggestion an hour and a half ago, to meeting with the STR, but I also think that it might be beneficial to approach the STR committee with what we have in mind, as folks who have a vision for the city beyond just profitability for owners of STRs, management firms, or whatever. I think that input is important, but you know, there's a whole lot of folks in town who don't own STRs, and they're important as well, perhaps more important.
I think that's one way. I think another way you could approach the STR committee is ask them for their comments and recommendations for your consideration. So it's not a decision by the STR committee, but it's that you want to get their inputs to make your decision. So that's one way to put it. The other thing that, you know, I thought was sort of interesting, and part of the reason that the Coastal Commission doesn't necessarily, you know, have a consensus is because the Coastal Act specifically protects visitor accommodations, particularly lower cost visitor accommodations. STRs are often, you know, can be more affordable for families, larger groups than hotel rooms. So there is a Coastal Act protection of STRs as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think asking for their comments, the STR committee asking for their comments is certainly okay. But I just feel generally that we should probably give them a little bit more direction, and because this is literally like drinking from a fire hose. I'm sure that by the time that they figure this all out, it's going to be a long process. So asking, I'll just leave it at that. You know, it's going to be difficult.
Could a workshop be a different format between us, the STR committee, which might get more members of the public in, and we could begin the workshop with kind of guiding principles and thoughts. The goal of this discussion is to figure out ways to improve affordable housing options in town. You know, that's the intent behind this. With that in mind, I don't know if workshop versus, I don't know if that really gains us much, but yeah, with the understanding this is, I mean, ultimately it's our decision to pass what we put in here and approve is what goes to the council with their input, which is, you know, I think we all agree is valuable.
Oh, and hopefully we would get some input from the public.
Yeah, and I to what you suggested, Chris, I worry that if we just give them this document, there can be a loss of context, you know, with them as they read it, and without having all of us here to kind of say, well, no, here's what we were thinking. And I think there's benefit to that, as unwieldy as that might feel. So I guess I'd advocate kind of a joint opportunity. So we can answer Trevor's question on page 21. Is it fair to say I'm getting the sense that all the entities that this impacts are kind of waiting for somebody to be first and to go through this? The Coastal Commission, staff, the commissioners, the HCD, everybody. And I just, are we really the first ones to come across this?
No, I think just the new 2023 laws. So the height and the front yard setback, I think, are things that at least our local office hasn't dealt with. Because Humboldt County has a brand new ADU ordinance. Years ago, it's only a couple of years. Just the new things, but STR. So that was one of the examples. So Humboldt County does not allow either the ADU or the primary unit to be STRs. And I think originally it was only the ADUs, and it was Mike Wilson, who's a coastal commissioner, who said he wanted both and very strongly advocated for that. And the county voluntarily changed that.
But that's inconsistent with the STR ordinance, that draft ordinance that they're looking at right now.
The ADU ordinance came first. So maybe they have to amend the ADU ordinance. It probably won't affect existing ADUs, but it's in, I haven't looked in detail at the ordinance. It sounds like it's going through quite a few changes, but basically,
yeah, and it's a draft.
I mean, they're basically gonna cap it.
Yes.
Well, and to the point you keep making, Richard, we've got the STR cap in town, which may manage a lot of our.
Yeah.
But it doesn't apply to JADUs. ADUs can be STR.
Correct, but the non-JADU version of that is the home share STR, which also has no cap and doesn't fall under the cap, right? Home share ADUs, you could have as many as you want in town, right? There's currently.
I'd have to, yeah, I think.
The STR, excuse me.
Yeah, I think there's a cap on resident STRs, but I don't think there's a cap on home share STRs, because that was what people were advocating for, is they only want STRs when the resident is in residence. So that's what that. So there's not a cap on those, but again, the resident would be in residence, so. That's where I think it can make things more affordable for I think that scenario can make things affordable for homeowners and even tenants. Having that situation.
So how do we want to proceed?
It sounds like you want to request a meeting with the STR committee. And I mean, I think whether you call it a workshop or more formal meeting, I think, I think if you get the public, get some announcements out there, either way, you're as likely to get public. And then I guess it's just a matter of what do you want to give them? I think I would suggest, kind of, you have to give them some context, but trying to keep it to the STR topic as opposed to the whole rest of the ordinance.
I guess I feel that it would be useful to have in front of us prior to the meeting and have a chance to discuss it, which was, I'll call it the matrix that you were talking about, or some way to kind of just get this into some form where we can take a look at it and understand for each level of ADU, JADU, what the permitting requirements are and some of the other issues that we've raised tonight. Because in my mind, I'm still struggling with, oh, is this a ADU that requires a administrative permit versus a, ministerial permit? I'm still, I understand it, but I think if I could see it and maybe kind of noodle on it a little bit more, that would be beneficial. That's just me. I do feel, though, that just throwing this cold to the STR committee is not beneficial to us or them, not fair. I think they need to think about this a little bit. And I don't know when their next meeting is. When is their next meeting, Chris?
October 2024, probably.
Oh,
not to say they couldn't call a meeting soon.
May. I mean, there's so little stuff to discuss that they're supposed to be.
Okay.
I think it's supposed to be twice yearly.
Okay, I just.
This would be a reason to have an action.
Yeah.
It's usually in December, the joint with the PCCs.
Yeah.
It's usually December. Oh, December or January?
No, it's usually January. So then I guess maybe would it make sense to have Trevor at our next meeting, if that benchmark is manageable, bring back kind of that matrix thing for us, and then be able to put together also a little short primer on ADU, JADU. Just kind of high level stuff. This is mandated by the state. We don't have a lot of input control. Junior ADU is a room inside somebody's, just kind of a high level definitions so that we don't have to get into weeds, but to kind of promote that joint meeting that we might have.
So that would be good, for when this gets to the council and.
Executive summary, I think, because we've talked about those terms before, right? Does that sound
Sure.
like a reasonable
Yeah.
approach? And then,
I'm so happy with that.
okay.
Is there any way we can incentivize putting them out of sight? Like you get special reward for how well you designed, you dug it into the ground or whatever.
Free grading permit if you make it subterranean. Right?
Really good thing.
You get to cut down your trees if you.
Because somebody's gonna do something, and we want them to do it creatively if possible and make it better. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out possibility.
Well, I mean, in a sense. Not really with the minimum standard envelope that the state has provided. No, I think you don't have that kind of leeway. We can't require design review. We can't require additional standards above and beyond what the state says you can.
But we can, we
But-
turn it into a CDHP or whatever. That if it's their what was it called?
The LCP, if it's part of our certified LCP, you mean?
Yeah, certified LP, yeah, everything becomes a certified LP.
Yes, but only if the coastal commission agrees that that's necessary to protect coastal resources.
Say it all is a very special town.
But then does that create problems for other development that people might want to do? If we designate everything as, and not in a bad way, just something to think about, unintended consequence of that.
No matter how you look at it, it's
Yeah.
problematic.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the only incentive that's out there for somebody is that they can come in under the minimum ministerial requirements, then they get an automatic stamp and they can have their ADU. That's the incentive. So I guess any way we can, to whatever extent we can massage those, which isn't much because they're the minimum requirements.
Yeah, and again, I think it's, we can't argue that all houses in Trinidad are below 2,000 square feet and 20 feet in height. We just can't. There's too much variability. So it'd be hard to make an argument based on, we have to keep it within the confines of what's existing because.
No, we're just trying to protect it, any views and or not, or the way it feels, the town's feel. It could easily become boxed in on the roads. And that's really what we're trying to just keep it in a good way. And so if you're gonna do something, then guess what? It goes into this special world and you need to do it in a good way. Need to be good neighbors.
I think, I think Trinidad is unique, but I think, that's part of the problem is that everybody argues that their neighborhood is, well, this is the character of our neighborhood. And so this development isn't consistent. So, and I see it, next door is the most frustrating thing. Oh, it's a subdivision. Can we know? I think it is. We're just going nuts about it.
We're never here.
And I wanted to comment, you are the reason why the state keeps taking away local control because you're trying to argue against development. You like this nice open space in your neighborhood and you want to keep it. Well, that's why the state keeps taking away local control because. But yeah, and that's sort of the balance is, that's what the state's trying to prevent.
I realize that you can do it if you check all the right boxes. I'm just saying that we need some oversight to help people see possible other ways of doing it. Other than that, the town just doesn't become a bunch of stupid boxes.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a goal. I'm not.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out. And then we want to make it, I want more rentals. I'm not trying to discourage it.
yeah. No, I think you could do, hey, we'll give you $500 off your property tax bill each year if your ADU meets this, in addition to the state requirement. I mean, I don't know that, but yeah, I mean, you could probably do, or the city will recognize you as an outstanding ADU and you get discounts at,
Pictures.
I don't
know. 2024 ADU.
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's gonna, I just recognizing people, I'm not sure it's gonna be much incentive, but I mean,
Maybe permit fee reduction.
well, yeah,
Perpetuity.
yeah. You get reduced permit fees for life. I don't know. But yeah, you could do something like
Anyway,
that.
okay. So I guess, sounds like we've got some direction, Trevor, just to
So,
come back and, all right, because I think we could, yeah, please.
Yeah, I guess, given like our septic's such a limiting factor here, I mean, Tom's talking about, boxing in all the streets and like, I understand how that's like a fear that it's easy to like think about and have, but like, I guess I think probably most of these lots are pretty hemmed in by their septic systems and they don't really have room to expand it to put in another, or to have another bedroom on the property. I mean, or maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
I think there are very few properties in the UR zone that can accommodate a full second. ADUs.
Sure.
Yes.
Right.
And maybe some garage conversions, maybe there could be some garage conversions on some larger lots that don't have a lot of big primary unit or a lot of other development. But I think there are very few properties. Realistic. It would be, and there's really no way to figure that out. Because septic are sized based on specific soils on the site. I do have a map, because the STR ordinance has if your lot is over 10,000 square feet, you can have a couple extra people. So that might give you, so the lots that are over 10,000 square feet, I could give you that map. I mean, that might give some idea of how many lots might do accommodate that.
Does our lot coverage percentage ratios play into this at all for an ADU? They're completely exempt from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Trevor, from what you just said, where did the limit of 36 ADUs come from then?
That came from the water demand assessment.
Okay.
So I made an assumption. I think I took all the lots that met the minimum lot size and took a quarter of them.
I forgot. That's right.
It's not likely that many will ever be developed.
I have one question, because I think we sat down here saying that we would like to answer Trevor's one question. And it seems like that's not going to happen, even though that was our sole desire. In that paragraph, you write, there is one particular area that we would like to get. Trevor's primary question, which is on packet page 21, which is page 4 of 5 of the current agenda item. There's one particular area that we would like to get planning commission input on, and that is whether STRs of any type are allowed. And my question is who the we is, and whether they specifically asked for planning commission input, or whether they may have actually meant planning commission input once the planning commission has consulted with the STR committee, you know, like they specifically seek the planning commission inputs without other.
No, I guess, maybe it was more of a me. I mean, because again, they didn't have strong feelings or strong guidance for me, and, you know, I think I hadn't gotten strong guidance from the planning commission, so I didn't want to make that call, so, and they didn't have a call to make, so didn't hear that. You could put it in someone else's lap.
They have no consensus amongst themselves either from what you've
Yeah.
related here.
I mean, it was interesting to, you know, hear staff disagreeing with each other a little bit.
So you say you would like to get planning commission input. That presumably also means planning commission input that was created in conjunction with the STR committee, or did you really primarily mean the input from the specific committee? I
think it'd be great to have input from the STR. I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's a great idea. They don't have approval. I mean, and you guys aren't necessarily approving the ordinance either, but you're making a recommendation to the city council. Part of the process where but they don't have that kind of authority of a planning commission, but better, especially from a body that's tasked with.
And hopefully we, with the right advertisement, we can hopefully get some public.
Yeah, I mean, this may not be indicative of how it always goes, but Jennifer asked for availability for October meeting. I think it was like 3 months in advance. So I don't know if that means that it's going to be 3 months until we can get the STR committee together, but it took roughly, you know, we had a 3-month booking window, I guess, this last time.
That might have just been a matter of convenience, but I can send out something.
Yeah, but also interacting with those folks, I think they'd be willing to just.
What, sorry, this just popped out in my brain again. You say under state law, ADUs meeting certain standards are not allowed to be STRs? What is that?
Yeah, so like I was saying, there's,
You know, obviously none of what we're considering, you know, what would fall into that category? And would we ever likely see that?
I could give you that. I don't think I have the state code and.
No, that's fine. If it didn't seem meaningful, it just caught my attention.
Yeah, the original state code said, you know, sort of had these minimum standards. And you had to adopt an ordinance and it ministerially approved certain ADUs. And now they have another set of, they added another subsection on this code that says, and these ADUs, you'll approve whether you have an ordinance or not ministerially. And I don't understand why the two different ones, and they're not super different, but one says they shall not be STRs and one says you can prohibit them from being STRs. And I just want everything.
Okay. So then, yeah, I guess if you can reach out to the STR committee let them know, hey, we want to put together a meeting, this is coming up. Planning commission would like your input as they make their decision recommendation to the council, and then I guess, you know, sometime after January, because that's when we're likely to see the matrix and kind of the summary, if you will. Yeah. Have a fun dive at this. Anything else on this one for tonight, everybody?
I think maybe the chair of the STR committee. Yeah, sure that this is a valid thought. Like, I think that they might appreciate seeing this in its current format, sooner rather than later, as requesting.
You're certainly welcome to it. It's on public document on the website. You know,
it's not valid, but I just wanted to make sure that they're sort of aware.
Who's that?
It's ridiculous.
Sounds like a great. idea.
Yeah,
But when I reach out to them and say the planning commission would like your input, I can point them to this and say, but I will be getting you some more specific.
Right, yeah, I thought maybe we didn't necessarily need to wait until the matrix is created to
Yeah.
bring them on board.
Sure.
and let them know that a summary more specific to the STR related issues of the ordinance is coming their way. Moving on, that was all three items. Any commissioner reports? That's meeting. All right, anything else, Trevor, from a staff report standpoint?
I'm just saying, I'm gonna be out for 3 weeks, so we have to cancel.
Oh, shucks.
And
Which we often do anyway, and I don't, it's funny, I just got 3 big applications, this is just 2 of them, in last week, had nothing all year. Sorry, you're last in line, actually. Just 2 days too late. So that's, but I don't necessarily have anything for the December meeting anyway, and I don't think.
the council also decided last night not to have theirs in December as well, so we'd be.
Ours will be earlier, so it wouldn't have been as tough scheduling, but
Can you just briefly say what the 2 applications are?
3.
Three.
If anybody remembers the subdivision on Langford, the property, it's split by city county. So Neil Ewald, his house, he's got his house coming.
Yeah.
I got that last week. One is the lot line adjustment of the big property on Underwood. So that's actually it's kind of like a subdivision because everybody thinks of it as 1 lot, but it's actually 4 lots and it's a lot line. And that will allow construction of more houses. I think it'll be 3 lots. And a subdivision of Tristan's.
Cool. Anybody want to add anything for future agenda items? Or we get where they are?
Not a request, but just a query, because I know there's been a lot of discussion of traffic calming measures at the city council meetings. I was wondering if we are expecting any traffic calming stuff in front of us in the next 3 to 6 months.
We don't usually. That planning doesn't normally see that. Sometimes I get consulted on things. And more because if some things might require a CDP or design review. Some things eliminate parking or things like that. Generally that is.
The only thing to date that they've actually approved and moved on was striping, fog line striping on Ocean and View, and then painting of quasi-simulated speed humps at the kind of first third, second third of each street. So
Wasn't there I think I made a comment in one of the previous meetings that permanent fixtures, like for example, the bulb outs for technically developments.
Yeah,
Painting and striping is not included in that.
Yeah, and so that's where I haven't really looked into whether speed humps would be development under the coast side, but
it's paint. It's only paint.
No, I know. These are just paint. So that wouldn't, but sometimes signage and things might, depending. But the bulb outs are development because they parking isn't code. So they're changing the intensity and use of land. They're changing. So he's done a lot over the years without CDPs, but that's the Coastal Commission.
All right. With that, then we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. At 8.
For half an hour more, I could have gotten out of bed in one of these.
Well, unless your family's gonna check the tapes, I mean, what you do for the next half hour is up to
That's
you.
true, yeah, let's go.
Rec-